What if I told you that the greatest battle you'll ever fight isn't against an external enemy, but against invisible diseases that silently destroy your potential from within? Imagine your mind as a garden, capable of producing the most extraordinary fruits of success, happiness, and fulfillment, yet constantly under threat from weeds that, if left unchecked, will choke out everything beautiful you're trying to grow. Today we're diving deep into what I call the 7 diseases of attitude, those mental weeds that quietly sabotage your success, relationships, and well-being before you even realize what's happening. These aren't physical ailments that show up on medical scans, but they're every bit as real and potentially more devastating to your life's outcomes. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to transform every opportunity into gold, while others watch similar chances slip through their fingers like sand? The difference often isn't skill, intelligence, or even luck. It's attitude. The way you perceive and respond to life's challenges forms the foundation of everything you'll achieve or fail to achieve. This journey we're embarking on isn't just about identifying these destructive thought patterns. It's about developing practical strategies to uproot them permanently from the garden of your mind. By the end of our time together, you'll have a 30-day battle plan to transform your mental landscape from a chaotic, weed-infested plot into a thriving sanctuary of possibility and growth. So let's begin this exploration with a fundamental truth that might surprise you. Negativity is completely normal. Just as every garden naturally produces weeds, every human mind naturally generates negative thoughts. The problem isn't that these thoughts exist. The problem is what happens when we fail to recognize and manage them effectively. The most successful people in history weren't immune to doubt, worry, or indecision. They simply developed superior methods for addressing these mental invaders before they could take root and spread. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how they did it and how you can do the same. Let's start by understanding the true nature of the battle we're facing. Negativity isn't just normal, it's actually the default state of the untended mind. Think about a garden left to its own devices. Without intentional care, what happens? The weeds don't politely wait for an invitation. They aggressively overtake every inch of available soil with remarkable efficiency. Your mind works the same way. This is why I describe the relationship between positive and negative attitudes as a great war, a constant battle for territory in your consciousness. What many people fail to realize is that this isn't a balanced conflict. When positive thoughts remain passive, negative ones will always advance. The good must be active, vigilant, and intentional to maintain its position, while the negative requires no such effort to spread. Consider this. Have you ever noticed how quickly worry can consume your thinking if left unchecked? You might start with a small concern about an upcoming presentation, but before you know it, you're catastrophizing potential failures, imagining embarrassment, and even questioning your career choices, all from a single seed of doubt that found fertile ground. This war isn't fought on equal terms. Negative thoughts have a biological advantage. Our brains evolved to give greater weight and attention to potential threats and problems as a survival mechanism. This negativity bias served our ancestors well when predators lurked behind every bush. But in today's world, it often creates unnecessary suffering and limitation. The most important insight about this mental battlefield is that you cannot remain neutral. Inaction always benefits the negative. Just as a gardener who decides not to weed is actually deciding to have a garden of weeds, a person who chooses not to actively manage their attitude is unknowingly choosing to surrender to negativity. Now, let's examine the first of these attitude diseases that might be infiltrating your mental garden: neglect. Neglect is perhaps the most dangerous attitude disease because it operates invisibly. It's not characterized by doing something wrong, but by failing to do what's right. It's the silent permission you give for important areas of your life to decay through inattention. Think about relationships that gradually dissolved not through conflict, but through simple neglect. The friend you meant to call, the partner whose emotional needs you overlooked, the child who needed guidance but received distraction instead. Neglect doesn't announce itself with dramatic failures. It works through the accumulated damage of 1,000 missed moments. The philosopher William James once said, "The art of being wise is the art of knowing what to overlook." But the disease of neglect inverts this wisdom. It's overlooking what should never be overlooked, focusing on the trivial while the essential suffers. Research from the University of Scranton suggests that 43% of our daily actions are performed habitually with little conscious thought. This means nearly half of your life might be running on autopilot, potentially neglecting critical areas while your attention is elsewhere. Here's a practical exercise to combat neglect. Create what I call a neglect audit. Take a sheet of paper and draw 4 quadrants representing your physical health, relationships, personal growth, and contribution to others. Rate your level of intentional attention to each area from 1 to 10. Then identify one specific action you can take this week to reduce neglect in your lowest scoring quadrant. The simple act of bringing conscious awareness to neglected areas begins the healing process. Our second disease of attitude is indifference, the absence of feeling strong emotions about important matters. Indifference is particularly destructive because it masquerades as maturity or stoicism when it's actually a form of emotional disconnection. Consider how indifference manifests in the workplace. A Gallup poll found that 85% of employees worldwide feel disengaged or actively disengaged from their jobs. This epidemic of indifference costs businesses over $7 trillion annually in lost productivity. But the cost to individual lives is even greater, the slow death of passion, purpose, and meaning. I once worked with a talented executive I'll call Michael, who prided himself on his emotional detachment, seeing it as a leadership strength. "I don't get too high or too low," he'd say, but his team described him differently, as cold, uninspiring, and impossible to read. When we explored the roots of his indifference, we discovered a childhood where displaying emotion was met with criticism. What began as self-protection had evolved into a leadership liability. Through coaching, Michael began to recognize that strong feelings, properly channeled, aren't weaknesses but essential fuels for motivation and connection. He developed what I call emotional courage, the willingness to feel deeply about matters of importance and to express those feelings appropriately. Take a moment to reflect. What in your life deserves your emotional investment that you've been approaching with indifference? Where might you be using detachment as a shield against potential disappointment or vulnerability? Remember, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And a life marked by indifference is a life half-lived. Our third disease is indecision, the habit of postponing decisions to avoid the responsibility of choice. Indecision is particularly insidious because it feels safe in the moment, but accumulates massive opportunity costs over time. The average adult makes about 35,000 decisions each day, according to researchers at Cornell University. Most are inconsequential, but a significant few shape the trajectory of our lives. Yet many people apply the same hesitation to life-changing decisions as they do to choosing a breakfast cereal. History provides countless examples of how indecision at critical moments can alter outcomes. During the Civil War, Union General George McClellan's notorious hesitation to engage Confederate forces despite superior numbers frustrated President Lincoln and prolonged the conflict. Lincoln eventually replaced him with the more decisive General Grant, observing, "If General McClellan does not want to use the army, I would like to borrow it for a time." The root of indecision is often perfectionism, the belief that there must be a perfect choice without downsides. In reality, every significant decision involves trade-offs. The question isn't whether a choice has disadvantages, but whether its advantages outweigh them. Here's a practical decision-making tool. When facing an important choice, create 3 columns. In the first, list what would likely happen if you make the decision. In the second, list what would likely happen if you don't. In the third, list what would happen if you postpone deciding. This simple framework often reveals that indecision itself is actually the riskiest choice. As the American psychologist William James wisely noted, when you have to make a choice and don't make it, that is in itself a choice. Indecision isn't avoiding a choice. It's making the choice to let circumstances or others decide for you. The fourth disease of attitude is doubt, not the healthy skepticism that asks good questions, but the persistent, debilitating lack of confidence in yourself and your capabilities that prevents action. Psychologists distinguish between self-doubt and self-questioning. The latter is healthy. It helps us improve and correct course. But self-doubt is corrosive, undermining our efforts before we even begin. Research from the University of Edinburgh found that persistent self-doubt correlates with higher stress hormones, reduced immune function, and even accelerated cellular aging. I remember my own battle with doubt when I was transitioning from a corporate career to becoming an entrepreneur. Despite extensive preparation and industry knowledge, a voice in my head constantly whispered, "Who are you to think you can succeed at this? You're not ready. You'll fail publicly." These thoughts were so convincing that I delayed launching my business for nearly a year. What finally broke the paralysis wasn't the elimination of doubt, but learning to act alongside it. I discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than that fear. Try this mindfulness exercise when doubt arises. Notice the doubtful thought without judgment. Say to yourself, "I'm having the thought that I'm not capable." This creates distance between you and the thought. Then ask, "Is this thought helpful or harmful to my goals?" And, "What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail?" This doesn't eliminate doubt, but it reduces its power to control your actions. Remember, doubt and confidence aren't opposites. They're often companions on the path to achievement. The goal isn't to eliminate doubt, but to prevent it from having the final vote on your decisions. Our fifth disease is worry, the habit of using your imagination to create negative scenarios that drain your energy and distort your perception of reality. The fascinating thing about worry is that it's almost entirely self-generated. Unlike problems that come from external circumstances, worry is a mental activity we actively create and maintain. It's like renting trouble from the future at a very high interest rate. Dr. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, found in his research that approximately 85% of what we worry about never happens, and of the 15% that does occur, most people handled the difficulty better than they expected. This means the vast majority of worry represents wasted mental and emotional energy. The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca understood this when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This insight is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Worry isn't just mentally uncomfortable, it has significant physical consequences. Chronic worry triggers the body's stress response, raising cortisol levels and potentially contributing to heart disease, digestive problems, and weakened immune function. Here's a powerful technique for managing worry that I call worry time. Schedule a specific 15-minute period each day dedicated exclusively to worrying. When worries arise outside this time, simply note them to address during your designated worry period. This contains worry to a limited time frame, rather than allowing it to infect your entire day. During your worry time, write down each concern, ask what specific action you could take to address it, and either schedule that action or consciously decide to let the worry go if no action is possible. This practice doesn't eliminate worry, but it converts the energy of worry into either productive action or conscious release. The sixth disease of attitude is pessimism, the expectation that negative outcomes are more likely than positive ones, and the tendency to focus on what could go wrong rather than what could go right. What makes pessimism particularly dangerous is that it often disguises itself as realism or pragmatism. The pessimist doesn't see themselves as negative. They believe they're simply being realistic, while optimists are naive. However, extensive research by Dr. Martin Seligman has demonstrated that optimistic people tend to be more successful in nearly every arena of life, from business to sports to health outcomes. This isn't because optimism magically creates good results, but because optimistic people try more often, persist longer, and recover more quickly from setbacks. A striking example comes from a study of insurance sales professionals. Those with optimistic explanatory styles, how they explain successes and failures to themselves, sold 37% more insurance than pessimists and were half as likely to quit during their first year. The good news is that pessimism isn't a fixed trait, but a learned thought pattern that can be unlearned. One effective approach is the best alternative scenario exercise. When your mind automatically generates a negative prediction, deliberately create two alternative scenarios, one neutral and one positive, that could also result from the same situation. This doesn't require blind optimism, just the recognition that negative outcomes aren't the only possibility. For instance, if you think, "This project is going to fail," generate alternatives like, "This project might face challenges but ultimately succeed with adjustments," and "This project might exceed expectations if we leverage our team's creativity." This practice gradually rewires your predictive patterns from automatically negative to more balanced and possibility-oriented. Our seventh and final disease of attitude is complaining, the habit of expressing dissatisfaction without taking responsibility for improvement. What makes complaining particularly destructive is its viral nature. Research from the University of California found that exposure to just 30 minutes of complaining, even as a passive listener, physically damages the brain by peeling back neurons in the hippocampus, the area critical for problem-solving and intelligent thought. Complaining creates a dangerously seductive illusion. It feels like you're addressing a problem when you're actually reinforcing it. Each complaint strengthens neural pathways associated with negativity, making future complaints more likely in a self-perpetuating cycle. This doesn't mean we should ignore genuine problems or put on a false smile when facing difficulties. The distinction lies in intention. Complaining focuses on the problem with no ownership of solutions, while constructive criticism identifies issues specifically to address them. Will Bowen, founder of the Complaint-Free World movement, created a simple but powerful challenge. Wear a bracelet and switch it to the opposite wrist every time you catch yourself complaining. The goal is to go 21 consecutive days without switching the bracelet, which research suggests is sufficient to break the complaint habit. When you feel the urge to complain, try the transform the complaint technique. First, express the complaint clearly to yourself. Then ask 3 questions. What need of mine isn't being met? What request could I make that might address this need? And what action could I personally take to improve this situation? This converts complaint energy into solution-focused action. Now that we've examined the 7 diseases of attitude, let's develop a comprehensive 30-day plan to transform your mental garden from a place of weeds to a sanctuary of growth and possibility. This attitude transformation plan operates on 3 levels simultaneously: awareness, interruption, and replacement. You'll learn to recognize negative patterns quickly, interrupt them before they gain momentum, and replace them with more productive alternatives. Days 1 to 7 focus on awareness. During this first week, your only goal is to become conscious of these diseases when they appear in your thinking. Carry a small notebook or use a notes app to track each instance, noting which disease appeared and what triggered it. Don't try to change anything yet. Just observe with curiosity rather than judgment. This awareness alone often reduces the pattern's power. Days 8 to 14 add the practice of interruption. When you notice a disease of attitude, use a pattern-breaking technique like the stop, breathe, recenter method. Say stop firmly to yourself, or out loud if appropriate. Take 3 deep breaths and physically change your position. Stand if you were sitting or move to a different location. This breaks the mental and physical state associated with the negative pattern. Days 15-21. Introduce replacement strategies specific to each disease. For neglect, establish daily intention setting for your most important priorities. For indifference, practice active appreciation by expressing genuine gratitude daily. For indecision, implement the 5-minute decision rule for any choice you've delayed. For doubt, create a victory log documenting past successes that prove your capabilities. For worry, apply the worry conversion process, turning concerns into specific actions. For pessimism, practice the also true technique, finding what's positive that's also accurate. For complaining, use the solution-focused communication method, addressing how to improve. Days 22-30. Focus on integration and habituation, combining all previous practices while adding environmental design elements that support your new mental patterns. This includes curating your information diet to reduce exposure to needlessly negative content, restructuring your physical spaces to reinforce positive attitudes, developing specific language patterns that reflect your new mental approach, creating accountability through sharing your journey with a trusted friend. Progress is measured not by perfection, but by recovery speed, how quickly you notice and redirect negative patterns when they appear. The goal isn't to never experience these diseases, but to develop such effective responses that they no longer control your outcomes. As philosopher William James noted, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind." This 30-day plan gives you the specific tools to make that alteration real and lasting in your life. We've traveled together through the landscape of the mind, examining the 7 diseases of attitude that can destroy our potential when left unaddressed. We've explored practical strategies for uprooting these mental weeds and replacing them with thoughts that serve rather than sabotage our goals and well-being. Remember the garden metaphor we began with. Your mind requires the same consistent care, feeding and weeding as any garden you wish to flourish. There are no shortcuts, no miracle products that eliminate the need for daily tending. The rewards, however, far exceed the effort invested. The quality of your life ultimately reflects the quality of your attitudes, not your circumstances, not your talents, not even your actions, but the mental frameworks through which you interpret and respond to the world around you. I invite you to begin your 30-day attitude transformation plan today. Start simply with awareness, noting when these diseases appear in your thinking. This single practice, maintained consistently, will reveal patterns you may have never noticed, despite their profound influence on your life. If this exploration has resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more insights on personal development, and share your experiences in the comments below. How will you begin transforming your mental garden today? What disease of attitude has most limited your growth until now? The war for your mind continues every day, but armed with these insights and practices, you now have the advantage in that battle. The garden of your mind is waiting to produce extraordinary fruits, but only if you become an active, intentional gardener. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, remember that your greatest power lies in your ability to choose your attitude in any given moment. Choose wisely, choose intentionally, and watch as your life transforms accordingly.